If your name is Zoom user or iPhone, if you would identify yourself by going into participants, we would appreciate that. You don't have to turn on your camera, but we would appreciate just knowing.
Although it's nice to see you when you speak, it really adds to your presentations that we should consider it.
We're now joined by Councilor Bowman.
All right, we can start the meeting whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm gonna hit go.
Recording in progress.
Welcome everyone to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Safety and Transportation Committee of Newton City Council. It is Wednesday, February 22nd. At the start of the meeting, I am joined by committee members. Councilor Bowman from Ward 6, Councilor Lucas from Ward 2, Councilor Markowitz just sitting down from Ward 4, and expecting other members of the committee. We are also joined by Councilor President Susan Albright and Councilor Andrea Kelly.
And also Councilor Wright just joined.
Oh, welcome, Councilor Wright. These councilors are not members of the committee, but of course are welcome to our committee meetings. We are, in addition, joined by Chief Gentile from the fire department and Chief McMains from the police department, Josh Ostroff from the planning department, Chief Operating Officer Jonathan Yo, Chief Bianchi, I think it is, from the fire department, and scanning Maria Greenberg, counselor from Ward 1, Commissioner McGonigal, welcome, from DPW, Councilor Humphrey, member of the committee, Councilor Oliver from Ward 1. I think I've got everyone at the start of the meeting as we move along. Ms. Delaney, if you'll just let me know as people join the meeting. We're going to start with item 52622, Councilors Albright and Kelly requesting a discussion and creation of an ordinance that would limit the winter parking ban, either through a pilot program in wards 2 and 3, or a permit program that would apply across the city based on established criteria or some other option as derived at through the discussion. The desired outcome is to remove the burden on residents with no place to park their cars during the current ban period. And for the public, I want to set expectations right at the start. My intention is to open this discussion and continue the item. I'm not taking public comment tonight, although all of your emails have been read and recorded. Councilor Lipoff is here from Ward 8. He's a member of the committee. Welcome. And all of your comments will continue to be with us. We have read them. We are continuing to read them, and we pay very close attention to them. I think before this gets to the point where we vote on an ordinance, we may want to consider a public hearing. But at this point, I'm going to let the docketers present their ideas, ask their questions, and then perhaps we can, as a committee, help them to shape a process that will result in an outcome that is acceptable.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to start, and we're going to double get Councilor Kelly and I will sort of double team the issue. So I'm going to start by saying how I first became involved was through a constituent who lived on the other side of the turnpike in Ward 2. And he called me, or he emailed me, I forget now, it's 5 or 6 years ago, and said, I just bought a house and it has no driveway and I have no place to put my car during the winter parking ban. And the person that sold me the house said, call Councilor Albright, she'll solve this problem for you. So that was my entry into this area. Councilor Kelly will tell you about, she has a similar involvement, and she'll tell you about her own early stages in this overnight parking ban issue. We together docketed something about I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, Councillor Kelly, I think it was. And we asked for a pilot in our respective wards, and we weren't able to get that to happen. I have to say I was taken aback by my colleagues who, when they heard about my involvement because of this man with no driveway, said, well, he got what he paid for, he deserves it. You know, he paid less for that house, so too bad for him. And that was a shocking experience for me to hear that. But I will tell you that since that time, he applied to put in a driveway. I never heard the rest of the story. I hope he got his driveway, but he did apply to put in a driveway. So about 2 years ago, this was after the COVID experience when the mayor had the emergency powers to do away with the overnight parking ban. So just after that, when she learned she no longer had those emergency powers, she asked in her newsletter for folks to send us email, and they did. And we got over 500 emails, some mostly in favor of getting rid of the ban, but some on the other side. And Councillor Kelly and I hired a student intern who prepared a report and a summary analysis of those emails, which we would have provided you if we'd had the knowledge in time that neither one of us knew that this meeting was tonight until Monday. So it was too late to give you the report. It wasn't within the 48 hours, but we'll give it to you afterwards for the next time we talk. And it's a pretty illuminating analysis. One thing I learned before I turn it over to Councillor Kelly from the last go around on this topic was that people have several reasons for wanting to keep the overnight parking ban. And I think I have it down to 4, but there may be others. The plowing doesn't go curb to curb, and when there's a lot of snow, and adding park cars will make it impossible for emergency vehicles to get up and down the street. That's number 1. For some, it's the aesthetics. They don't want to see cars on the street all year long. Another reason is that students in wards where there are universities, their fear is that students will clog the streets because they're allowed to have cars all year long. And so if you take away the ban, there'll be more cars. And the last one is interesting. It's by the folks who are concerned about development in Newton, and they say if we take away the ban, it'll be a free-for-all and people will park everywhere in these newly developed housing developments that we're approving under special permits or 40Bs. So those are the reasons. And I think we'll probably hear from Commissioner, DPW Commissioner about the plowing issue. I think we might have a comment about that. The other issues, the students clogging the streets and the people in housing units clogging the streets, I think they are problems that can be dealt with in other ways. And that's what we want to think about and talk about as we work our way through this process. And so I think Councillor Kelly would like to tell you some of the reasons why we think this is an important topic.
Thank you, President Albright and Chair Downs. There'll be a little bit of overlap here, apparently, but how I got first involved in this too, as a then relatively new city councilor in Ward 3, is I was hearing from people on my side of the city, the north side of West Newton, about how the winter parking ban was impacting them. And this was before COVID. And it only increased during COVID, though it got better during COVID because we didn't have the ban. So my interest, despite what I heard from a constituent today, was not personal or to my advantage or pro-development, but was listening to the people in my neighborhood, my side of town, who were being inconvenienced and worse by the disparity and the inequity of this winter parking ban. I think at the core of this that President Albright and I believe everyone agrees that the number one priority here is safety. Like, we need to make sure the roads are cleared during a declared snow emergency so that emergency vehicles can get by. If we can figure out a way to do that, then I think we're heading in the right direction. The COVID experience did give us kind of an unofficial pilot experience with what it was like to lift the ban, when in fact there were more cars at home, more kids, more college kids, more cars here. And of course we have climate change and perhaps less snow. And from what we understand, having spoken with the previous and current police and fire chiefs, Susan and I have spoken with both of them, and the ongoing DPW commissioner, is that there were no major concerns during this that arose. So it brought it back up for us as we continue to hear from the over 500 people in Newton who think we should lift the ban, because it feels like the impact is unfair in terms of an equity situation, more impact on crowded, denser parts of the city. On the other hand, some of the people who live in the more crowded, dense part of the city are opposed to the ban. We'll talk about this. We hope that this will all come up in the discussion tonight. How it affects both homeowners and renters. And I'm here to say that I do hear from some people who don't care that it impacts renters. I don't think that's a perspective we want to take here in Newton, where a quarter of our residents are renters and not all of them don't care about Newton. I think that we really want to be sure that everyone, all our residents are well cared for here. I heard from people who were new to the city who were, say, for example, several households of 2 or 3 young, I say young, 20-something workers who rented a place, who didn't know that there was only 1 or 2 parking spots available to them. And they moved in, they came from out of town, they thought they could park on the streets, and then the winter came and they had nowhere to park their cars to get to work. So our concerns have been right from the start, how do we ensure the safety of the winter declared snow emergency cleanup? How do we ensure that police, fire, DPW, and the towing companies feel that they have access to this? What are the overall impacts in terms of economic and equitable disparity? The issue that President Albright raised in some of our areas, say BC and LaSalle in particular, that neighbors were concerned about college students taking over their streets in the winter, or people who live abutting cities that don't have a winter parking ban. Where I live, Waltham has one, so it's not an issue, but like those that abut, for instance, Brookline, Boston, Alston have issues with that. We've been grappling now for years with how to get the word out, how to apply this fairly generally when our street system is so inconsistent. Some are narrow streets, some are curvy streets, some have one-side parking, which is why we came up with, again, the idea to start talking tonight about maybe just starting with a pilot in a very limited area. Could we examine that? Perhaps just the wards that Albright and I represent, could we just start with that to evaluate and get some data? I'm not sure we really have the data after the override. I mean, the COVID experience. And as President Albright mentioned, we do have like a really terrific survey and summary, which we're very happy to share with everyone going forward, that showed that after the mayor put in her newsletter, please reach out to your counselors about this. And we got over 500 responses then. The great majority of them wanted to lift the ban. And again, you can wonder who responds, but I think it was very important. It was from all 8 wards. We just would like to start the conversation again tonight and to hear from particularly the departments that are impacted and the mayor's office also, police, fire, DPW, residents. I understand that this is not a committee that typically takes oral public comment, but encourages people to write in. I think that a public hearing, as Councillor Chair Downs suggested, would be very helpful. So we could actually hear from people, residents, voters, constituents on this, and then share the results of the survey. And I'd love to just stop talking and move it on so we can have the conversation tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so we are looking at this point to get some answers for you from departments. And I have, heard from some of you who are unhappy that there isn't going to be public comment tonight. I think my point was, we don't have an ordinance in front of us. We're not talking about something specific. And we've had several discussions about the overnight parking ban. So I don't want to get into the generalities of that right now, although I'm happy to accept public comment in written form, but I don't think tonight is the night to have the wider discussion about whether or not to have an overnight parking ban, because we don't yet have a proposal. So who from the administration would like to go first? And do the docketers want to pose specific questions, perhaps?
Chair Downs, I will get started, and then
Okay.
Fire, police, DPW will all also jump in. Thank you for bringing this issue back up. We're ready to work with you as you look at ideas on different options or pilots. We'll be happy to work with you through our departments. Also, planning department is here too. Josh Ostroff, our new transportation planning director. So overall, as Councillor Albright, I think, or Kelly mentioned, the COVID experience was a little bit of a pilot. And although it wasn't announced all the time that it was going to be open for parking. So it was a pilot, but not a real full pilot. So as you'll hear from our departments, there have been no issues with people parking on the streets in the wintertime. But, I certainly, hear that list of potential concerns, and we'll certainly, whether it's border issues dealing with bordering communities. I think only Watertown really in particular has an overnight parking ban that, you may want to think about. So I will get started with DPW. So Commissioner McGonigal is here and hear from his perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Madam Chair and councilors. Yeah, as long as DPW has the ability to work with Newton Fire and Newton Police to declare a snow emergency during major snowstorms, we don't have an issue at all. During an average winter, we have less than 10 major plowable events. So again, it's not a huge impact to us. It doesn't impact our day-to-day operations, but during these events, when we do have accumulating snow that is predicted following the storm, if there are cold temperatures predicted, that's when we like to be able to get back to the curb as much as possible. And that's when we want to be able to declare a snow emergency. We always do that in coordination with the police and fire. And as long as we have that ability, Public Works is not impacted by anything you'd be looking to do here.
Okay.
Why don't we go over to fire?
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, councilors. Yeah, I'll reiterate a lot of what Jim said. I think it's that coordinated effort that we would worry about, but it's really no different than if this plan moves forward. We need to be coordinated with the DPW. We need to be coordinated with the police to make sure that we get that parking ban in place before the storm, and then we keep it however long that we feel necessary to make sure the emergency vehicles can get through. But we don't see this, and we do. So I've spoken kind of at length with Chief Lucchetti, who was the chief at the time of the pause on the parking ban during the COVID. So we didn't see any issues at the time, and we do not. We don't feel like there would be any issues with this, especially you talk about pilot. Meaning we could get some additional data points through that pilot program. But the initial kind of test of that, we felt pretty good about. We also work pretty closely with the police kind of on a daily basis with the police department on certain streets in certain areas of the city, which are narrow to begin with. And we do work with them quite a bit with parking on both sides of the street. But that's already something we do, and it's something that we'll continue to do. So, overall, we don't see this as being a problem for our operations.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Superintendent McMains.
Thank you all. I would agree with both Commissioner McGonigal and Chief Gentile. We don't specifically have any concerns about the all-night parking or overnight parking in the city during the winter time. One of the concerns that we would have is permitting. How's permitting going to be done? Obviously, I would assume the police department's going to be responsible for that. So I guess our concern would be, what does that look like and the workload it's going to cause on our staff? Everything else is, as both the chief and the commissioner had talked about, we all work hand in hand, removing cars that need to be removed and securing the parking lots and municipal lots so those can be cleared as well. So again, no issues other than, I guess, the permitting process.
I'll jump on there with Superintendent. I think we are concerned overall about administrative burden of anything. The police have a lot on their plate these days, and I really greatly prefer not to get into anything that's really too complicated for the police department to be managing. Let's try to, whatever happens, let's try to keep it pretty straightforward. Thank you.
I will remind my colleagues that the last time this came up, Chief McDonald at the police department was fairly adamant that police were not going to be likely able to scrape windshields to see if there was a permit attached to a particular car windshield in the snow. And that that was one reason we put that particular idea on ice, shall we say, because, without technology to track it by license plate, it made very little sense to put in a system that couldn't be enforced. So just so that we have that history in front of us while we're talking about this. All right.
I put a few things on the table.
I'm sorry.
I just put a few things on the table of
Okay.
to work on. The issue of narrow streets has come up by many, particularly in Ward 1. And I know that Councilor Kelly and I had a conversation with our new chief back, oh gosh, it's maybe, I don't know, 8 months ago. One of the people who was at that meeting told us that in some cities they have alternate side of the street parking on narrow streets. So that's something we wanted to look at and put on the table as a solution. Another thing that we learned through this study was that other cities.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? So when I think alternate side parking, I think of New York, where you have to move your car twice a month or twice a week so that street sweeping can happen, but you're not talking about that.
No.
What are you thinking?
What we heard was, I don't know, in alternate years, it's the east side or the west side. I'm not sure, but some to administer, this is how we do it in 2022, this is how we do it in 2024. That's
okay.
So this is in Pittsburgh, if you wouldn't mind just adding, this is how they handled it, but it's streets that are wide enough to have parking on both sides. What they would do is whatever the winter, whatever it was, if it was an odd year in December, you park on the odd side of the street and then there's no parking on the even side. And then DPW would plow into the parking lane and leave the snow in the parking lane on the other opposite side of the street. So it allowed them to not have to clear the whole street, not have to push it up onto the sidewalk. And then parking was only on one side.
Okay.
I was just going to add to that, although I understand that Councilor Bowman is on the committee, so I raised my hand to speak. what's tricky here in Newton is, for instance, in Ward 1, they have instituted what seems to be a very effective street sweeping cleaning program, which is similar to what we were just hearing about alternating sites. But in Newton, we have some streets that only have parking on one side all the time. So that trading sides is difficult here. We have a lot of situations that make an easy overall. I appreciate COO's desire to keep it simple, and I think President Albright and I have thought that the whole way along, but there's a complicated situation where keeping it simple might be tough. So the one-sided parking is one of those things, because we have some streets that only have one-side parking all the time. And if it's not a blanket policy that can apply to everyone, how do we get the word out? How do we make communication clear without putting up signs, which are, visually messy? But I very much appreciated hearing from police, fire, DPW about their support and ability and continuing communications amongst themselves. It makes me feel like this is doable. We just have to figure out how to make it doable.
I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail. I think this may be worth a working group, and I'm going to suggest that before we get to the end of this anyway, to flesh out some of the details. But why don't you put your ideas on the table, and then I want to hear from the committee and then from other counselors.
I'll be quick. So another one is that certain other cities and towns that have overnight parking bans or wind or snow ban emergency bans make their municipal lots available to citizens during the snow emergency. So that's something we really don't do. So I'd love to talk about that as we go along. And the last one is what ideas we might have for dealing with the issues of the wards that have impacted by students. What overlay district or permitting program could we create for that? And also for what permitting programs could we think about for housing developments where it would impact particularly village centers if there were no ban, and how we would handle it through a permitting program. So those are the ideas that we thought about, and just want to put them out there.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly, anything to add?
The only thing I'd like to say, following up on McMahon's comment, is the issue of permitting and enforcement, which appears that it would fall on police, is something we really need to think about. Like, what is the burden? What is the additional requirement of one particular department to do this? And as we've seen in many other situations, I'm thinking about land use, enforcement is a really big issue here. So that's just something we need to keep in mind, like who will be administering and monitoring this and making sure it really happens. And I'm very sensitive to the ability or inability of a particular department, particularly police, to do that. So that's the only other thing I'd like to throw in before we open it up for more questions and comments, and hopefully good suggestions. Thanks.
The other question that I think we have to ask is about the Municipal Modernization Act. It allows us to charge variable pricing for parking as a mechanism for doing parking demand management, but I don't know if it applies to an overnight parking situation like this. So we may need to ask legal about that. All right, I have a long list.
Can I just say, I'm sorry, a quick follow-up to something that Councilor President Albright mentioned. I think a really important thing for us to think about as a city is during a declared snow emergency, of which maybe we have very few nowadays, where can we allow the people to park? As she mentioned, other nearby communities do provide parking in their municipal lots, their police, their fire, their DPW, their parks and rec, their school buildings. We do not do that. So I can see how easy it might be to lift the ban, but then particularly why Councilor Albright and I are thinking about doing it over here on the north side in particular is we don't have public parking lots here. Like the closest one from where I live is like 1.2, 1.3 miles away. could the city please rethink allocating some places where residents could move their cars during that declared snow emergency, and then plowing those lots later, for instance, schools, ed center, that are probably not going to happen. If that's just another thing for us all to be considering, where can we let people park when there are not public lots available? And with that, I will be quiet for a little bit to hear from other people.
Excellent. So I'm going to go with committee members first and then other counselors. Please be patient. Counselor Lucas, followed by Counselor Markowitz, please.
Yeah, I get to go first. Thank you, Chair Downs. I appreciate it. I know this is going to go on for probably many meetings before a draft ordinance comes up. So my comments on this are going to change over weeks, months, and time. But Officer McMains, forgive me, but earlier on you had stated that you were referring to a permitting process. What permitting process were you referring to?
That was part of the order, I believe, that was posted. It was a potential permit program or a pilot program. So I would be concerned just about the permitting. Again, as Mr. Yo talked about, we do have staffing issues, and how would we process all those permits? As well as one of the counselors, I forget who talked about how would we enforce that? Would we have to get out and scrape off somebody's car window to find out if they have a permit, or do we have to scrape off somebody's license plate to run that to see if they have a permit? That would be a challenge for us.
Okay, so you mean a permitting to allow people to park their cars on a public street overnight during December through March?
Yeah, we're talking about a potential permit program, and
Oh, okay.
Superintendent McManus is just raising some issues to think about for a
Okay.
potential permit program. We don't have one yet.
Okay, I was just, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you for the clarification. And also, I was just looking at just a general comment, if I can find it here. I was looking at some snow total stats. Over when we had COVID in the winter of 2020 and 2021, when we didn't have the parking ban, we had 38.4 inches of snow. That's Boston. I assume that's calculated at the airport, not so much for Newton, but it was 38.4 inches. The following year, without the parking ban, it was 51.9. Just a couple of days ago, the snow total for Boston was 7.9 inches. So this year we have lucked out. But I remember in 2015, we got slammed, and it was a total of 110 inches of snow. And I was just wondering, Commissioner McGonigal, and I wasn't on the council at the time, I don't know if you were in your current position, but how did the city handle its snow removal in the winter of 2015?
Thank you, Counselor. No, I wasn't with Newton, but I can say I was in the city of Boston. So very impactful. I don't think we should base anything on 2015. That was not the norm. None of the surrounding communities, including Newton, are prepared for that kind of snowfall. We shouldn't be, because it's not the norm. Our average snowfall is about 54 inches a year. We're very capable of handling that. Again, when we look at over 100 inches, double of our average. Again, that will be impactful to Newton and to every other surrounding community, because we're just not prepared to handle that amount of snow. So if that happens again, it's going to be a similar situation. Fortunately, that hasn't happened since 2015. So again, we base our operations on the average snowfall.
Also, you're raising a very good point, Councillor Lucas. It's not so much the number of inches, but how many snow events require our attention. If it were to snow a half an inch a day for all the days, and all we needed to do was, occasional reapplication of brine, it would not be a big deal. But if we get all 54 inches in a 3-day period, clearly you've got a problem, right? So it's not just how many inches are average or how many inches in a winter, it's how that falls.
Mhm.
So I don't know how you would count, how you would quantify that, Commissioner, but it's like the days when you have to have all the plows on the road. That would be a good number to have on average.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to speak for the commissioner. I think he said 10 is what the average was, but yeah, he's shaking his head. Yeah, 10. Let's see. If we do go forward and do some form of a repeal of the overnight parking ban, have to Councilors Kelly and President Albright, have you considered the impact of neighborhood parking ban requests, such as, we don't want parking on this side of the street, 2-hour parking limit, any sort of requests? Have you anticipated anything like that?
I think Councilor Kelly talked a little bit about that even this solution that other cities use where you park on 2023, you park on the east side, and then on 2024, you park on the west side. That's complicated in Newton because we already have so much signage about what's legal on which side of the street. So we don't have a solution for that. It's just something we need to talk about.
No, I'm sorry, President Albright, that's not what I meant. I'm sorry, maybe I'm not being clear. I was thinking about if, like, for example, I think Foster Street has it, where I think they have a 2-hour, because I see they have like a green and white signs on Foster Street, and granted, you can only park on one side of Foster Street. But I think they have a green and white sign that says, I believe it's a 2-hour parking max.
That would not be a city sign, though. That would be a private sign.
I believe that's a city sign. There are signs like that all around Newton where it limits parking.
But do they apply on the overnight? Do you remember?
Yeah. Councilor Lucas, we're really just talking about overnight winter parking, which is not about the amount of time during the day. But I think what you're getting at is, have we considered how difficult it would be to implement a simple citywide ban given all the particular situations that occur in Newton streets? Is that kind of a point that you're asking about?
Yeah,
and yes, we have, and we've talked with trying to look at an overlay and what are the difficult streets and how would GIS do it. And the more complicated it gets, again, back to Jonathan Yo's point, the more complicated it gets, the more difficult it would ever be to implement. I think something simple that applies everywhere would be better, but we're not there yet, which is why we're trying to start with a pilot in order to collect some data and learn some stuff from it.
Councilor Kelly, if I could just quickly also add on to that. I mean, Foster Street, yes, there's Google Street View here.
I just was looking at that too.
2-hour parking except Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. There are parking rules all across the city that have been developed by you all and David Kosis and the Traffic Council, and those things exist. The winter is really no different than the rest of the year. So all of these rules that we have in place on all of our streets, whether it's 2-hour parking near some development, or I don't know exactly why Foster Street, maybe that came with Trio, I don't know. But whatever rules were put in place by the Traffic Council for Foster Street, really for summer and fall and spring, are really no different than the situation in the wintertime. So I don't think we need to go, our opinion is we don't need to go too complicated on this. So that's my 2 cents.
All right.
Chair, this is Councilor Baker. Apologies, I'm just on an airplane and I'm about to take off. I just wondered if I could say a word and then I'll listen in.
Go ahead, Counselor Baker. I'll give you a
uh,
little, and then we'll come back to Counselor
Yeah,
Lucas.
I'm sorry, there's music in the background, but my colleagues in Ward 7 and I have some concerns about the proposal, and just two dimensions that we want to raise and then the committee can consider is a problem of student getting, we're near the college and there are other places in the city that have those situations. Also, my memory is Brookline still has an overnight parking ban, not just
Yes.
Watertown. And we're concerned about the impact of some people deciding to move cars from there to here. So I just want to mention those two issues, and then I'll be quiet because we've got Delta Airlines music. But my apologies.
And Counselor Baker, your points are well taken. And in fact, the proponents, the docketers brought both of them up. And I think one of the data points that they or a working group needs to come back with is what borders, what towns do we border have parking bans where we might see spillover, and then we also need some kind of tool to deal with student parking, and that's agreed. Counselor Lucas, are you all set, or do you have another question?
One more, just I think President Albright said you had a report or survey ready. Could you please send that to the clerk and she'll send it to the committee, please?
We will. We apologize that it wasn't here yet, but the timing didn't work.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Lucas. Next from the committee, I have Counselor Markowitz, followed by Counselor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, so I think most of the committee was around when we went through this. We had the initial discussion on this, although I'm remembering Jim Cody was a counselor, so maybe it was that many sessions ago, but all the predecessors of the fire chief, the police chief, and I think Mr. McGonigal was here, all said essentially what they said. So this has never really been, we all acknowledge that at this point in time, snow is really not what we're talking about here. I think, the implementation of this, as everyone has said, there may be an easy path through this that we haven't seen yet, which I think Chair Downs is right to the point of you talking about a working group and doing some further analysis on this, because this could easily spin in a lot of different directions. I'm also recalling from many years ago on public safety that I forget who said this, but I believe I learned that there were over 100 different sets of parking rules. Like if you just permutated them all out, and of course that's not hard to believe if you think about it. The winter thing is, I think, to COO Yo's point though, it is just another thing, but I think the confusion to people understanding it would be a big deal. And that gets a little gnarlier to contemplate. I think in the case of snow emergencies, just to close that part out, I think I agree with Commissioner McGonigal. They're going to be fewer and fewer of. There's going to be some bad ones probably. I don't think we'll live to see time when we don't have some of those. I think the people who may not be able to find parking, even if we can't create some kind of reservoir for them, they'll take the ticket. I don't think we'll tow in a lot of cases. Newton is not a tow-brained type city. We don't do that kind of stuff. So we'll tow where it's only absolutely necessary. What I'm trying to say, long story there, is I don't know that it's going to be a big deal. There will be some calamities and we'll deal with the calamity the way we deal with calamities. But to the commissioner's point, trying to plan for calamities in some cases probably just isn't, we're just not going to get there. I do think though, with respect to implementation, and this is my real substance comment, I guess, we have a lot of streets in Newton that are very narrow, and just a lot of odd geography, road geometry. Those places aren't great places to leave cars for periods of time. I think if you go with a 12-month, you can park, you're going to have a lot of places that you really don't want people leaving a car for an extended period of time. I mean, the abandonment law doesn't kick in, I think, until 72 hours. So you'll see a lot of cars just parked there, like any, we hardly drive cars in my house, so they sit parked in a driveway for a couple of days. I can see that happening in a lot of other cases too. And if that happens in places where safety is an issue, all the narrow streets, where you got a car always parked there, it's their day and night type of thing. a place where two cars cannot pass each other when there's a parked car. I think a lot of those are going to have to be looked at and determined, you know, is overnight parking okay on this street, but it's banned on that street? I could see something like that happening. And last thing I'll say is on permitting. I just, boy, I see a can of worms there. You're still gonna get into the equity questions there, and of course, the equity question always is some part of this discussion. So you're a resident, so you get a permit, but what about my overnight guests? Do I get guest cards for them? So it can get pretty complex pretty fast. You know, we have technology to fix that, fortunately today, which is working in of itself. But it's still to design it and get it working and again, be equitable about it. I think you're into, I mean, we have that even with the resident permits now. People say, my contractors, my grass cutter can't park here, I'm getting ticketed and so forth. So all that stuff, you know, kind of swells back up and you just have to think about it, you know, how you're going to deal with the exceptions and so forth if you have a permitting system, you know, some kind of permitting system. But anyway, a lot of stuff to think about. This will be fun. I think I once said to your predecessor, actually two predecessors, the late great Jay Saccone. I think I said we need to redo the parking system in the city. We really need to rethink the whole thing. And he looked at me and he said, "You're crazy." Just
them's fighting words in most
actually,
municipalities.
I sort of took it that way, but he was serious. Thank you.
No, I mean, raising the word parking is already fighting words.
Well, you know,
So
can I say one thing? Just
Yes.
a little humor. So I don't know how many people actually have done data design type work. I think a lot of people are familiar with what kind of a data entity is. If you took all the things that happen in the city of Newton, permits, marriages, building stuff, elections, all the different kinds of things you can think about, you could associate with the word Newton, and you put them all on a chart. You know what would be in dead center of the chart? It would be parking. All things lead to parking. And I think every counselor knows that. Thank you.
we know how to pack a room, yes. So I heard a couple of things to add to the docketers list. And I have a suggestion. The level of detail of what's in our traffic and parking regulations is astounding. Councilor Markowitz is absolutely right. And you are going to need David Kosis to sort that out. The question of whether we tow or not is going to be a safety question. And we're going to have to put our heads together with fire and police and DPW about how we do that. And sort of the odd geometry streets are going to be a particular challenge. We'll want to fact check whether we have an abandonment rule that allows you to call in a car that's been left on the street for X number of hours, because that would be one way of dealing with cars that are stored indefinitely. And of course, I'm sure you're both focused in on the equity question. So if you're set, Councilor Markowitz, I'll move to Councilor Bowman and then move, if I have no other members of the committee, to Councilor Norton.
Thank you very much, Chair Downs. So this may be one of the most complicated issues we deal with. It might be even more complicated than village center zoning. There are, I read through all of those emails. I was surprised. I went back in my count. I didn't get to 500, but I assume that we'll hear more about that. I'm not sure that it's necessarily a fair representation, just going back and reading the mayor's newsletter, if that's what you're basing it on, the emails that we got from that, because that was definitely written much more, I think, to get people who are upset about the ban existing to write in. So I'm not sure that covered, but I do think that in those emails, even the people who supported the ban and the people who are against the ban, we've heard a lot of good reasons that should make us think about this. I think the reasons why I think we should consider an option that addresses some of this. Some people have temporary situations, like they have a healthcare aid they've just had surgery, they've become elderly and disabled, or they're taking care of a disabled parent. We should have a better process that's not just, my neighbors have done this before, called it the police and gave them a plate number and asked them not to ticket because they had a temporary situation with a driveway being redone or somebody that they needed to care for them. But you know, as I've replied to people on this council and many people in the city, I am extremely concerned about just opening up the streets for parking will have the effect to add many more vehicles to the city. So we have some properties that were permitted before my time on Langley, and they have already, 400 Langley, approached traffic council to ask to remove the 1 hour parking time on Langley so that they could park their second car that they don't have a place for on Langley. And this is, they don't just want it during the winter, they want it year round. And I only need to drive past BC and make a left on Lake Ave. And now I'm in Boston and I can see the effect of what happens when you allow people to park on the street unfettered. Is the street is full of cars and it becomes hard for people to drive. It becomes hard for people to walk. It becomes hard for people to cross the street and to bike and all of those things. And so I worry about what will happen to our streets. So I'd have to really be convinced, or we'd have to have some thought as to what happens if we do start to develop, especially in some neighborhoods, a significant number of people parking on the street. Do then we propose having some type of parking permit program? And I'm not worried about the permit during the snow emergency, because during snow emergencies, no one should be on the street. And I think that's going to be another issue. So I live on a street that has significant parking during the day. And when we've had storms that have, say, started in the morning and people have parked and then walked over and taken the T, because I live one of the closest blocks you can park on all day to Newton Center. And then it snows all day and, you know, you guys are done plowing by the end of the day. We might not ever get our street cleaned again. Like, people pull out, they leave their piles of snow. We try to get the plows to come back. You know, we've had winters where the street has been hampered by that because the storms have come during the day and cars have been parked there. So I worry about a situation where we have a significant number of people parking on the street and not moving and not having a place for their cars to move. So those definitely have to come together. I do worry about the student parking. But I think we also heard from a lot of people who had spaces to park. It just felt inconvenient to have to shuffle the cars. And I live in a house with multiple cars, and yeah, sometimes we have to shuffle the cars and somebody has to go out with 2 sets of keys, and I live on a street where that may require you to actually stop traffic on the street because there might not be a space to pull it into, but that is just something that we do. And so I do worry about this. I'm glad that there's a commitment to do a working group and to think through solutions. I'm not sure we're going to be able to come up with a solution that works on every street everywhere in the city. I think we are going to have to think about differences of, you know, what happens in areas where we have a lot of multifamily housing and a bigger push for, you know, I'm not trying to exclude people who live in multifamily housing from having parking, but when there are 100 parking spaces and you have 600 people living nearby, it's, you know, you're going to have to do something because, you know, it's just, otherwise it's just going to be pushing out. But I appreciate this effort and I look forward to reading more of the report. And I think that's, yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have Councillor Norton followed by Councillor Albright, President Albright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's nice to be in this committee. I'm hardly ever here. So
Welcome.
I really appreciate my colleagues from 2 and 3 bringing this up, because you have been listening to people and we've all heard from people. And I used to actually support eliminating the winter overnight parking ban for the reasons that you've given, because it's particularly people who have less money, are renting, et cetera, who are most affected by it. Very much understand that. But since we've really, because of the development issue, I don't agree with doing that anymore. And at the risk of repeating some of the points, I do just kind of want to lay out my views on this. So the first is, to put it somewhat bluntly, I feel like we're talking out of both sides of our mouth on this issue. We've approved thousands of new housing units near public transportation, especially the commuter rail line. And we've told people that these new residents are going to take the T. Even with the terrible service and the lack of accessibility, that's what we've been saying. Don't worry about the traffic. People are going to take public transportation. But now we want to make it easier for people in those new units to bring cars because this would affect everybody. And I thought everyone's going to be taking the T. So for people who've been hearing us, particularly those who live on the north side where I am and are most affected by the new developments, it just seems disingenuous. The next point I make is that one of the biggest complaints that we get is traffic. So I don't see how this wouldn't be making a problem worse. That is one of the, maybe the top complaint that I ever get. In terms of, and this is where I think Councilor Lucas was going, at a previous meeting, maybe a year or two ago, when this was brought up, the planning department said that if there was an issue with overcrowding of parking on streets, then we could create more parking plans, such as we have around Newton North and Foster Street, and et cetera. And as we've been, I think, touching on, that is a whole level of bureaucracy and work for David Kosis and the police that create those plans and enforce them. The resident only plan, 2 hour, all that kind of stuff. So, and it's a lot more complicated for our police to enforce. Right now, you drive around, there's a car at night, you know that it's not supposed to be there. And as Councilor Bowman referenced, this is not theoretical. Look around, drive around Boston, drive around Cambridge, drive around Somerville. They are full of resident parking zones for exactly this reason. We know, as has been discussed, that our police have plenty to do within their current responsibilities. In fact, I learned, I should have already known this, I guess, we don't have an animal control officer anymore. A resident reached out to me yesterday, shocked that she had no one from the city to help her with a possibly rabid bat. If we were going to add more resources into the police, I'd rather we hire an animal control officer. In terms of having other people enforce it, you know, I don't know who else is going to be working in the middle of the night. So, anyway, I do think that this is an inelegant solution, but it is working, and I would not recommend that we make any changes now. One last point that actually Councilor Lucas brought up with me recently that has not been part of this, which is that we're not going to be, Massachusetts is not selling any more gas vehicles after 2035. So there may be less demand for parking on the street if you have to be parking in close proximity to charging. So that's something I haven't really brought up before, but I think we need to be thinking about. Thanks.
And just to add to the charging issue, my daughter's in a city which is phasing out fossil fuel vehicles right now. And she has one because she needs to move big equipment, and she is looking at a vehicle that she would charge up maybe once a week in a public parking lot and then park on the street because she has no driveway. But we do need to think about sidewalks and extension cords, which is a problem in some cities. President Albright.
I would love to have Councilor Wright and Councilor Aller have a chance to speak first, if that's okay.
I will then move to them. Certainly, Councilor Wright, followed by Councilor Aller.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I also have concerns, especially in the village centers opening up for overnight parking ban, similar to Councilor Bowman. We have monthly or bi-monthly meetings with Scott Lombardo, VP of Development of Mark Development. And he was talking about Trio, and they do have parking underground, but you have to pay for it. And they were finding that their residents were parking on the surface lots, and there weren't enough parking for other people coming there. And so they had to, get tough and ticketed and threatened towing people to get them to move their cars underground and pay for additional parking. And it took a couple of months, but it worked. But, there's always new residents moving in, so that they have to stay on top of it. So I think it will be an issue if we do open up overnight parking ban near the village centers where we're doing reduction of parking for these units that are being built. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Counselor Oliver.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So right now, I'm inclined to agree with several of the counselors who have spoke to the fact that, I think Counselor Norton just said kind of an inelegant solution that's in place today, but it's probably the best solution available to us kind of broadly. Maybe those are my words. Don't want to put those words in her mouth. But one of the elements here that I've been a fairly steadfast supporter of the ban. Once we started to hear those hundreds of voices saying, "Hey, look, I've got a legit hardship here," whether broken leg, surgery, and the list went on. Right, there were numerous of them. I don't consider a hardship to be someone who purchased a house with one parking spot or no driveway. To me, that feels different. However, I'd like to focus for just a couple of minutes on perhaps pilot design. I am also an ardent supporter of testing. Let's see what we get. Let's go and get some actual data here. I would love to see some real thought put into what that pilot would entail. How long? I assume we would do it for one winter, I'm assuming. We would want that to include the right streets. And yes, I realize I'm being obtuse and vague with that statement. That's intentional. We need to include the right streets to do that with in the right neighborhoods. I think that if we're able to design a pilot that would truly inform decision-making on several fronts that we've heard tonight, I would certainly support a pilot. As of right now, I think that the points from or the points that were made by Councilors Bowman, Norton, Lucas, and Councilor Wright all seem to make sense to me. Like we have approved, we've approved a lot of housing and a lot of special permits based on the number of units, size of units, number of on-site parking spots, because we were able to curb, no pun intended. Oh no, I'll go pun intended on
Go
that
for
one.
the puns.
Yeah,
Go for
the
them.
pun, right? Let's bring them in there. It does seem to me that we've made a lot of decisions heretofore based on no on-street parking over the winter, and I think unraveling that would be challenging at best. But I'd be really curious to work on a pilot design. I don't think that feels beyond our reach. But I'll just close by saying I don't think that a universal lift of the ban across all streets in the city would make sense either. I think we've kind of landed on that, or most of us have kind of said the same thing there. And with that said, I'll stop because we're definitely going to be talking about this for a while. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Oliver. President Albright, would you like Councilor Greenberg to go first?
Please. Thank you.
Councilor Greenberg, please.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I won't repeat everything that some of the councilors said, like Councilor Norton and Bowman and Wright. This is such a difficult quandary for me. I support the ban because of all the reasons stated. However, I know that there are many hardship cases out there where folks cannot find a place to park and have small children, disabled family members, and I feel for them. And I just wish I had an answer of how we could help them. Like Councilor Kelly said, I think one simple thing we could do is still allow those folks who have permits to park in our municipal lots to stay in those lots when we have the snow emergency, because I'm not sure where those folks go when there's a snow emergency, that they have to move their car during a snow emergency. I'm not sure where they go. So I think we should allow them to stay, and then once the snow emergency is over, and then plow those lots. I think that's one simple thing we can start with. Perhaps, I know there's some neighbors here in Northampton that are working on businesses in the neighborhood who would share parking with folks who don't have enough parking. Because as we know, there are a lot of businesses around here who have extra large parking lots with empty spaces that could be used. So perhaps we could look at that. So that's where I stand right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Greenberg. And you may or may not be aware, but Needham has, for the daytime, for businesses in Needham Center, worked out a parking plan where private lots share parking with one another, based on when they have peak times. And I believe MAPC, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, helped them with that, and they might be able to help Northampton as well. President Albright.
Thank you. So I want to thank everybody for all your comments and suggestions and identifications of the problems that we know we're going to face. And I think Councillor Kelly and I did a good job of fleshing out all those problems. I think we knew the depth of the issue from the start, I fear. A couple of things I just wanted to respond to. I know we have hundreds of different kinds of signs and so forth, but we managed to work it out from April through November with overnight parking. So I'm guessing we could probably figure out how to do it for the other 3 months of the year. But a word about the survey, that it's not a scientific sample. It's not a scientific sample. The purpose of doing that work was to flesh out the issues. What are people saying is the problem on both sides of the issues? The ones who said they don't like the ban and the one that says they do like the ban. I think they fleshed out all the issues, and I think that's what you'll see there. And so I guess I just want to wrap up by saying we knew the problems, and the problems, and it's going to be a heck of a good time trying to figure this one out. So I hope you'll give us the time to work on it and come back to you.
I will agree with you on that. One other thought is, and this is another reason that you may find some resistance, although perhaps not majority resistance, and that is the other uses of the curb besides snow storage and fire passage and street sweeping. There are folks who are worried that once you get entrenched on your parking spots, then the possibility of making protected bike lanes there instead becomes much more difficult politically, or for other mobility uses, or for on-street dining, or other uses the curb might be put to. So we need to find a way to make sure that is still possible.
I just hope we'll always keep in mind like the single mother with two young children under 5. She has to drop them off at home and leave them by themselves while she goes to park a mile away.
Definitely understand those issues. Yes.
So I don't think it's a problem we should ignore. It will be hard to figure it out, but I think it's worth figuring.
Councillor Bowman, a parting word?
Yeah, so I didn't want it to be the parting word, but I will just add to that I think what we heard there were a lot of people who had who do have issues that we should be addressing. They're disabled, they're dealing with very young children in there, and a situation where they didn't expect it. But if we open it up for everyone who has a critical need and the people who just don't want to be inconvenienced to swap out their cars, we could end up with streets that are very clogged. And then they become, as I said, they're difficult to manage regardless of how you're getting around. And I'd also say that I also appreciate one thing we didn't talk about was there's a good portion of the city who sees no issue with this because nobody ever parks on their street. They might be the only one on their street who ever parks on the street ever year round. And for that part of the city, it's really hard to explain to them that if we're trying to come up with one blanket policy. So I hope you seriously consider the concept of of segmenting this out and, yeah, taking, but I know it's in good hands because, you, President Albright and Councilor Kelly, you're thorough and good idea people, and I know you'll work it and I expect good things out of this committee.
And definitely recruit Counselor Oliver for your pilot structure. All right, I would take a motion to hold.
So moved.
Motion to hold. Oh,
I think I can do this by acclamation. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Any abstentions? I think that's 8-0 or 7-0.
No,
7.
6-0.
6-0.
6-0.
Oh, right, we're missing Counselor Malachy. I forgot that. Super. Thank you both so much, and thank you for to the chief, the superintendent, the deputy chief, and COO, and everyone else, commissioner, for stopping by. I really appreciate your time. Our next item is number 7822, discussion on transportation priorities and public works, for which I think Mr. Ostroff, Director Ostroff, welcome. I believe you're in charge on this one.
Thank you so much, Counselor. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Great. I'm very pleased to be with you tonight. Josh Ostroff, your fairly new Director of Transportation Planning. I've got an update for the committee on the new bicycle pedestrian network plan that many may have heard about, but we're just getting that work underway. So I have a presentation on that. And then short updates on a few other projects that I'm helping to advance. The Washington Street pilot, the Albemarle traffic calming project, and a recently awarded Safe Routes to Schools grants to address concerning conditions at Parker Street and Route 9, Parker and 9. So, and I'm glad to be here, answer any questions. I think before I get into it, I just want to take a moment and acknowledge the extraordinary work of Nicole Friedman, my immediate predecessor in this role, who I've known for many years. But she managed an enormous quantity of work to a very high standard. So I'm honored to try to fill her bike shoes. So I'll get into it with this presentation. If I think folks have received it, and if not, glad to send it to you. I should also just mention I'm at jostroff@newtonma.gov with any questions if folks want to get together and talk about anything of interest in the transportation realm, because this is just a little bit of what I've been working on. So the Bike Ped Network Plan comes to you after several years of work and advocacy. I won't read all of these slides. It's here just for your for reference. But the point is to have this be things that are action oriented and lead to implementation of projects. Just speaking of Nicole for a moment, one of the things where she had a great expertise is in shaking the money tree to get state and other grant funding for a lot of transportation initiatives. That anytime we can leverage outside money to advance our mobility goals is worth doing. So I expect to try to follow that example as well. So implementation is key. We want to focus on the safety concerns of people on foot, on cycle, those with disabilities, to think of our schools, recreation, civic institutions, transit village centers, and other high traffic destinations. It would include a core network of protected bike lanes, shared use paths, neighborways, and other bike lanes, if they're twice, looking at speed reduction, slow zones to maximize safety, and really focus on accessibility, and also include off-road trail segments, of which several are in development or in use. So I do want to acknowledge the counselors and staff that are here today. This plan is intended to complement Newton's ambitious climate equity and economic development work. It's funded by 80,000 in ARPA funding. And we put together an advisory committee that includes members of the council and many other stakeholders from Council on Aging to the Youth Commission and many others. So about 15 or so people. And their role will be to help with outreach and engagement and provide oversight of the plan. Those of you who are on this committee, thank you. We'll be scheduling meetings in the coming weeks. And I think I just said that. So you've got extensive local knowledge that we hope to leverage. And this is going to be about a 12-month project, so there'll be plenty to review. We're working with a well-respected national firm called Kittleson and Associates. They've got a couple of dozen offices around the country, and they focus on I would put them in the progressive category, not traditional. They are well regarded and excited to work with them. We've got Barney Heath and I meet with them every couple of weeks. Our next meeting is this Friday morning, and invite you to check out their website. So very broad scale timeline. We're going to spend the next month or two assessing our existing conditions. There is a lot of work product to look at. Many of the plans that have been done in the past, the conditions of our roads and sidewalks and curb ramps, the beacon priority list. I think that information may have been provided to folks. We're also identifying some of the trouble spots and pleasure points around the city for biking and walking and accessibility. And we'll do a site visit in April to just get a good handle on what those are. Then we identify the bones of the network. Where are the places that we most want people to get to and from walking and biking? Prioritize those, the elements of the network and make capital improvement recommendations, and then develop the plan and provide documentation. There would be online public input and at least 2 large-scale public meetings, and the plan itself would be online. So these are just some of the many elements that Kittleson is looking at for existing conditions. It's everything from where we plow to get to schools, the public works construction schedule and maps. Many are of our existing planning resources, open space, Riverside Vision Plan, Washington Street Vision, and so forth. I think these are things that many councilors may be familiar with and have already looked at in depth over the years. So as I said, in April, we'll be looking at some of these trouble spots and successes, and then have a widely available public input process, because we want to see, we want to hear from the public as broadly as we can. There's a network plan website. It's pretty basic for now, but we'll build it out over the coming weeks. Kittleson will do something called a story map, which lives in the ArcGIS family of products, and that provides a visual geographic tool to help provide the most, it complements geography and text and images to really give people a good sense of what we're doing and why we're doing it and where we're doing it. And I expect that we will use a lot of social media, the mayor's newsletter, various social channels in order to get the most engagement we can. So I want to just mention 2 other things. The bicycle advocates are well organized in Newton and in many other communities. Less well organized are people just focusing on the needs of pedestrians and for people with disabilities. And I think that, you know, everybody is a pedestrian for at least part of their journey. And we all either have a disability, permanent or temporary, or live with, care for, or work with somebody who does. So I look at it as my role to really ensure that all stakeholders are represented and part of this plan. I'm a cyclist. I own several bikes, taking nothing away from that. And I enjoy my engagement with people who bike. And I'm a big fan of kids getting to and from school and other destinations on bike. But it's not just about cycling. It's about making Newton a great city for walking. Before I get to the other things on the agenda, I'm happy to take any questions or comments that councilors may have. And I know I'll be back as well, so.
Anyone from the council at all, from the committee or the council? Just wave frantically or raise your hand.
No question, but of course, I'm super excited for us to finally get started with this. It's long overdue. We are, of course, the last major community in the area that does not have a plan like this. And bike ped, of course, those two go very well hand in hand. The type of changes that you make to make it safer for people to bike usually makes it safer for people walking as well, but they do need to have some special considerations as well, and accessibility. And I think one of the things that we should rest assured is, especially as we move towards making our biking network that's much more protected, we are actually making it open for more people with disabilities who might be in a motorized vehicle, or they just might be in a recumbent bike or a tricycle. You know, we're making it possible for them to use those spaces as well and to be active, have active transportation needs and options. So it's not one or the other. It's not bike lanes or accessible sidewalks. It's both, and they do serve those communities both well. But very excited to get started. And Councilor Lucas is excited too, aren't you, Councilor? You and I are the two appointees to this committee, so I think we're very excited about this.
It's excellent. Councilor Bowman, just on your remarks, I'm reminded that this month we lost two huge pioneers in Newton on accessibility and walkability and safety, with Gerard Plant just recently, and John Bliss, who was on the original bike ped task force, I believe. And both of them worked very hard on sidewalk snow clearing, which similar to overnight parking was an intractable problem that needed to be solved bit by bit, piece by piece. All right, any other comments from the committee or other councilors? All right, go for it, Director.
Thank you so much. I'm not used to being called director. I think I'll have to ask my wife to start with that. What do you think? Or maybe not. Couple of other things. I think Washington Street has probably been discussed more than any other major roadway in the city. The current work we're focusing on is what we're calling the Washington Street pilot. It's an outcome of lots of work product over the years, maybe over the decades, including the vision plan. From Chestnut Street to Lowell Avenue, we're looking at right sizing the street. And this is really, while we're planning to put structures in the roadway for bike lanes and bump outs, we are laying the groundwork, we hope, for a much bigger vision for what we want to do along that corridor from, as I personally look at it, Washington Street, the full length within the city. But I'm thinking big right now, and I'm sure others have as well. Whether that gets broken up into smaller projects in the years to come, we will see. But there's just from some visioning work that's been done, we look at a 4-lane strode, or sort of a street, sort of a road that's very unfriendly and unwelcoming, where kids who bicycle along it have no safe choice other than to use the sidewalks, to something where everybody has their own space, and it's the people who live nearby or use it as a conduit for their destination can do so safely, comfortably, and easily, and support local businesses along the way. So we have Howard Stein Hudson on board to complete this work. They're doing data collection now. I should mention, by the way, that for all of these things, students are at the top of mind. So this is an important route to get to Newton North. The project is supported with host community and ARPA funding. Right now, we're doing data collection and then preliminary design, and then we'll have public input in the coming months. Our next check-in with the consulting team is March 7th. It takes them some time to do their data collection. Those tubes in the roadway or other counting devices, a lot of mapping, base layer mapping work, crash data, and so forth. So Howard Stein Hudson is busy at that, but we're excited for their check-in. And I believe a couple of council members will be hearing from me to participate in either that meeting or other meetings for briefings and to get your input, because we want to assure good representation from the council. I'll go through all of these and then people may have some questions about them. But this is a table from the vision plan from a few years ago, and I thought it was a helpful way to see what's the difference between something that's supportive of a friendly, enjoyable road and ones that are contrary to what we want. So we want more trees and green spaces. We want to have well-managed parking, and that's clearly defined. Wide, comfortable sidewalks with lights and benches, and just make it something that you don't want to avoid it, you want to use it. So this is just one way to think about some of the elements that the consulting team will put in. The next thing to update you on, and I know that many of you, probably all of you, are familiar with a lot of the concerns relating to students not feeling safe, not being safe getting to their destinations. As Albemarle is the key north-south greenway, or it will be, that connects to Washington Street in the neighborhood of the pilot via Brookside, all the way north to the Charles River Bike Path. There's many schools and after-school programs, recreation destinations, the Gath Pool, Fessenden, Day, many others. It's been the subject of a lot of studies, master plan, and input, and now we're really ready to start getting to one of the two big jobs that we need to address in the coming years. So we've had an extensive public process over the years, long preceding me. This will primarily focus on surface treatments like speed humps, signage, and paint. We are anticipating a design within a week or two. It will be reviewed at a Complete Streets Working Group meeting in about 3 weeks. Anticipating a public meeting the end of March, and then advertise for construction, hopefully before school starts. This is funded through MassDOT grant. Importantly, the Crafts and Albemarle intersection is related, but that's a separate MassDOT project. Public Works and Planning and the mayor's office are talking about this. We realize the concern. I wish that we had ways at our disposal to address unsafe behavior, but it's not an easily solved problem as quickly as we would like. And I know that we'll have further conversations on that. Jason and I were just talking about that today. Just a visual so you can get a sense of what the project layout. Both sides of Albemarle, for most of it, Brookside down to Washington, and Albemarle up to the Greenway. A very pleasant place to ride unless you are dealing with school buses or unsafe cars or people backing out of angled parking spaces. So there's a lot of solvable problems. The next is the great news that we got from Mass DOT on February 1st about a Safe Route to Schools grant. What is coming next on this $624,000 grant, I believe, is a road safety audit and a MassDOT design process. They really take over this entire project. We don't have a bunch except staff and volunteer time. So it's scoping meeting next Tuesday. Looking forward to that. Thinking of construction in a little over a year. The focus is Parker and 9 signalization, surface, and signage, but a couple of other streets will be involved. And just reading over the great support from schools and families, some describing really scary crashes, but a lot of schools were involved. So excited about this. And just getting back to the bike ped plan, had the opportunity to speak to the youth commission or subcommittee of the youth commission a couple of weeks ago in recruiting a student to be on the advisory committee. I'm so impressed by the thoughtfulness and the energy of the kids in our public schools and how much they can contribute to solutions. So I really want to harness that energy. These are, not just pedestrians and cyclists, but they're, future counselors, they're future leaders. I want to make sure through the work that we do together that they understand they've got a voice and contribute to vision and then make something happen. And what's exciting about this project and even Albemarle is that it is quick turnaround. People will have ideas and suggestions, and then within the span of memory, call it a year, they'll see actual change. So that is that's what I've got to share with you tonight. I always happy to speak at length, but I know time is valuable. But you may have some questions or concerns about this or other things that I'm working on, and I'm really happy to take that comment now.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I have a question from Councillor Norton.
Thank you so much, Director Ostroff. I'll call you that even if your wife won't. Super helpful and liked that it was concise. It's helpful. Also, I didn't see green stormwater infrastructure as part of the Washington Street project. And I feel like Jonathan is going to put something on his bingo card, because every meeting we're in now, I bring up green stormwater infrastructure. Exactly. But it's a lost opportunity every time we redo a road, really anywhere. And it's just not something that we do as a matter of course. My understanding is that Natick does, the community you're more that you've spent more time in, has been doing more of that. And Michelle Wu just announced a green stormwater infrastructure plan and actually hired someone to be the director of it. So it's something I think that we would be, our residents would benefit if we were looking ahead, not just for the water quality benefits, but the flooding mitigation. So I didn't see that on the list, even though I saw a lot of other great things. So I just wanted to call that out. And then in terms of the Albemarle project, something I don't think should be expensive or complicated that was recommended in the vision plan for Washington Street was wayfaring signs to the Charles River. It's just a nice element that I think people would appreciate, and people who are new to the area would actually learn something from. So just wanted to make sure that that could be, or at least recommend that that could be a part of it. Thanks.
Appreciate that suggestion. If I, first of all, have you been spying on my calendar? Because a meeting tomorrow with Jennifer Steele and I'm sorry, I'm blanking the name of some of my coworkers, but we actually are going to be having on a Complete Streets working group agenda, which I convene every 2 weeks, a whole discussion of stormwater and greenery as part of Complete Streets. I know I'm preaching to the choir at the moment, but I'm glad you raised that. That is really important element, and not something, I mean, I love one thing about our planning department is all the different perspectives and disciplines that work together, and extending to public works and other divisions of city government. So that's something that we're looking at. But with Washington Street pilot, I don't know that we want to touch our stormwater system, or we'll be able to do that within the scope of the work, the funds. But I'm glad you mentioned it, and I will put that on our agenda for our check-in. Actually, I'll send a note to the consultant and see what we can do about that. And thank you for the wayfaring sign suggestion. That is, I'm sure that's within our scope, and we can talk about that. And, with so many schools and other destinations along Albemarle, and since we're trying to establish this as a greenway, giving people a sense of direction is important. So thank you for both of those comments.
Thank you.
Councilor Norton.
I'll say Councilor Norton. And totally agree on the green infrastructure, but time and place. Quick question while we're on the topic. Chief Operating Officer Yo,
Yes.
We have an opening, a vacancy in DPW under stormwater.
Yes, do you know any good candidates? We're interviewing right now, so.
Oh, good. I'm glad we're interviewing. I was wondering where we were with that. That's why I wanted. to
We're
bring it up.
in interviews, DPW's conducted several, and if you know of any great candidates, please send them our way. Thank you.
All right, well, I'll leave that for the director of the Charles River Watershed. Councilor Lucas.
Thank you. I have a job. Although it's not in that field, it's in book publishing. So,
I wasn't suggesting you. I was suggesting you might know somebody who knows somebody.
I do not know anyone who is in that field, actually. Sorry, I do not. But it is nice to finally meet you, Director Ostroff. I know we had exchanged emails, and you helped me out with the Albemarle Brookside bike plan. Thank you very much for that assist. I really do appreciate it. Yes, thank you. And I just want to briefly comment on the Washington Street, I guess, bike plan and potentially narrowing it from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, 4 lanes to 3 lanes with a turning lane. Whatever we come up with, whatever the pilot is, there's nothing written in stone, at least I hope not. And we're all going to keep an open mind. But I was talking with someone just a few hours ago, actually, who lives on Washington Street. I mean, people think Washington Street is, you know, just commercial buildings and Trio, and then you got the Pike on one side, but people do live on Washington Street. There are homes there, there are neighborhoods there. And, you know, I've said this 1,000 times before on this committee and on land use. 4 or 5 years ago, a contractor for the Mass DOT just clear cut a whole bunch of trees along the south side of Washington Street. And now you can literally see the Mass Pike when you're standing on the sidewalk on Washington Street, on the north side of Washington Street. And pollution. You know, there certainly would need to be a study, certainly by the state, the federal government, our government. Something needs to happen because I can't imagine it's healthy having all those thousands and thousands of cars go by daily and kick up all that debris and dust into people's homes. It just, that is not a healthy way to live. And I keep thinking about back during the, the 60s and 70s when they built the interstates and they put them through, Black neighborhoods, immigrant neighborhoods, working class neighborhoods. And, now we know that that was wrong. The health ramifications of that were just awful. Asthma, we all know that. There's no need to go into that. But the reason why I'm mentioning that now is because if we are redesigning Washington Street and whatever comes out of it, I mean, I would like to see potentially the sidewalk or the berm being extended out from the south side so that there is ample room to plant some trees. Evergreens, I don't know what type of trees that would grow in those spots. I'll leave that to a arborist or whoever, but that's something that I would like to see. But I mean, I'll just leave it at that, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Director.
Thank you, Counselor, and thank you for letting me recruit you to another job. We'll try to work the advisory committee for the bike ped plan around your schedule. I want to just zoom out a little bit. I think that you all know, I think because you serve Newton, but the way that highway was built and designed and built in the 60s is a profound injustice and something that we are trying to repair decades later, because it should be a livable, enjoyable street and not something that is just like the victim of airborne pollution from the Pike. So I think that's a really well taken point, and sound barriers might help in some respects, but that is really balancing the problem elsewhere. So what can we do to capture carbon, to have, just better air quality, noise quality for along that stretch. So that's on my notes also, to ensure that we are thinking of those elements, because this pilot could be with us for a while. So I do expect that we will have that as part of it. I appreciate you bringing that up.
If I could,
not
Josh,
that everyone-
if I could also mention, Josh, as somebody who lives a block and a half from the Pike myself there in Newtonville, getting trees planted certainly is going to be something, and or I don't know what we do about sound barriers, where that bounces to and from, but is something we're certainly going to want to explore and find and maximize in the final game plan, whatever is built there in the long run. It may or may not necessarily be part of the pilot, because the pilot is not necessarily going to get a chance to build all of the infrastructure that we're eventually going to want along Washington Street. But your point is incredibly important. Yeah, when they came and took down all those trees, we did get some additional new trees planted, but it's still, we still need a lot more planted along the turnpike. So, Counselor, it's a great point.
Thank you.
Could I build on that? And thank you so much, Jonathan. We are also in regular contact, myself and Barney Heath and my colleagues in the DPW, on talking to the T about the commuter rail stations that we'd like to see built as quickly as possible, and making sure that whatever they contemplate for staging and access and changes to the roadway geometry is something that we would also think about as well. But I do have a note to follow up on trees, and I know that sometimes the Mass DOT is very siloed. The people that are in charge of chopping down trees are not the people that are in charge of dealing with municipalities, we hope. So, but it's really important to make the case. So if you have, or if others can direct me to like specific places where they happened, if we are looking for something to be restored, I mean, more recently, I'd love to get those particulars, and then I can work with others on staff to see what can be repaired. And I mean, I don't just have the institutional knowledge yet to do that. So
yeah, the city forester Mark Welch has that information, where he worked with a bunch of counselors here after this all happened a few years ago.
Okay, great. Well, I'll loop Mark in as well as we talk about the Washington Street plan. So thank you.
There's also plenty of things in the Washington Street plan that talk about different ideas for shielding the street from the Pike. So I noticed, Councilor Norton, you have your hand up again. President Albright, did you want to speak, or did you just pop to the top of my screen for some other reason? Okay, Councilor Norton, go for it.
Yeah, just to update you, Director Ostroff. The Ward 2 counselors have been working with a liaison committee from the TRIO project about a wood fence that we were told would do some noise blocking, but the latest word we had was because of the commuter rail project using that same area for staging, that's sort of on hold. So that's pretty, I mean, great to have the project if it'll actually move forward when it moves forward, but the residents have been waiting for 5 years for that. As Jonathan said, the MBTA, after they did cut all those trees down, they did actually reimburse us, I want to say like $30,000 or $40,000. And Mark Welch did go through the area and they did replant. If it's worth taking another shot at them in terms of their property, maybe they wouldn't do that because of the commuter rail project that's coming. I don't know, but I can put you in touch with the person that we dealt with who got us those replacement trees quite quickly.
Would that be different from Mark?
Yeah, the person from MassDOT.
Oh, great. Okay, good.
Yeah, so I'll send that to you.
I'd be very happy to have that. Thank you so much.
President Albright? You're muted.
Yep, thank you. I just wanted to remind you, Director Ostroff, I'll call you Director also, that there are a couple of counselors that are to be added to your working group. Your staff, I'm sure it is a working group. And we hope to be invited to that soon.
Absolutely, Counselor. Thank you. And we, yeah, I apologize for not having done so. We're still at the stage with them of just making sure they have the resources they need to, to begin this work. But I apologize for not being more in touch, and we'll certainly make sure you're both advised of meetings and you can attend as sees fit, and we can have a separate briefing. And then when we are ready for public meeting in the neighborhoods that are affected, we'll ask for you to be the honorary hosts.
Well, could I amend that just slightly, or try anyway?
Sure.
That we're not just interested in how the public views what you're doing. We're interested in working on what you're doing and helping you figure out what to do.
Yeah, the project hasn't really begun yet, so it's just starting. So your representation, you will soon be involved.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Excellent. I can't wait for this all to get started and to see things starting to appear. The initial views of the Albemarle project, the prospect of finally linking what we hope will be a Great Washington Street to the Great Charles River paths, safely dealing with problems that we've had with the Parker Street overpass on Route 9, so that it's finally safe enough that parents will allow their kids to go to high school on their own. All will be huge improvements, and I'm missing something. Councillor Markowitz, please go.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. I just had kind of it's a question related to the Washington Street project. I'm not sure, and welcome, Director. I'm not sure you even necessarily know this yet, or maybe haven't gotten to it. But Mr. Yo is here too. So I recall when we first talked about the project for this Washington Street project, I think we approved an amount of around $500,000, something like that. And at the time, there wasn't, in my opinion, a real statement of work as to what exactly was going to be done, who was going to do it. And at the time, the question I had was, how do we know we're going to get what we think we're going to get for the money, given the amount of effort that at that time, at least, I'm not looking at it now, but my recollection was that it looked like a lot of work. It looked heavy on the data collection part to me, to be honest with you. I thought I'm just going to say this as an ex-consultant, it looked a little padded out to me. But in total, the job is definitely a lot of work. And at the time, your predecessor really couldn't answer that question. So I don't know if you can, but I guess my question is just simply, are we going to be able to get what we think we're getting out of this thing, a full trial, or are we going to have to potentially reduce the scope or get more funding for it?
Thank you for that question. We do have a contract with a pretty well-defined scope of work, and I get regular invoices that I review and then submit for approval. And so, and we're in regular touch with them. So, it's I will say, a $500,000 contract here versus less than a tenth of that for Albemarle. It's sometimes it's hard to understand what are we getting. I mean, as a former consultant, because from the consultant's perspective, not to malign or my former your field, but it may not be as precise as delivering well understood goods or commodity services. But this is something where it's really up to us to ensure that everything that we expect we get, and that includes up to construction cost estimates and helping us to frame a larger proposal, but maybe not bring it to 25% design, but more at a conceptual level. But I'm glad to share the contract or just make sure that people have confidence in this process, because it may be other people's money, so to speak, host community, as opposed to like local tax levy, but it's still the city's money to spend as it sees fit, and it has to be done thoughtfully and accountably. So,
Yeah, and this isn't really a question about accountability on that level. It's just that it looked like the scope was pretty broad. I think I can't remember off the top of my head what the specific enumerated deliverables were, but I know we had some. But just say you're kind of in the chair now to maybe, I don't know if we have time for it, if we're interested in it, but to get kind of a periodic report just to know that it is tracking along. Because again, I thought it looked a little ambitious and I wasn't sure, and you want to get what you think you're going to get. And if something has to change, sometimes things change, but it's just about knowing about it and making sure we don't leave something on the table that we should have, that we somehow have to get. So that's really my concern there. And again, it predates you a little bit, but it's just, I think, part of what, as you manage these things, you'll have to kind of deal with.
Just a reminder, Counselor, there's $500,000 for this initial work from the HCA funds, and then there's $3 million from ARPA to really get this project
Actually do the project, yeah.
Yeah, and just the pilot, the whole project
is just the design work, really.
Yeah, the whole project, in the long run could be tens of millions of dollars. So
yeah, when we get into construction, sure. But I'm just talking about that first piece, the design piece. It still looked like a lot. Right. And I just
we'll post the contract language and all that stuff so you can see all the details. I thought we enumerated it quite well the first time around, but we'll post that all so that you can see it.
I said website. We knew what we were getting. I wanted to make sure that we thought we could still get it, just given that there was some.
That's a great point.
They didn't have things like who was going to do the work, what the rate per hour was, all that type of stuff. They didn't, at least in the version I saw, and that was what drew me to. It was sort of like a fixed price thing, and I thought, are we really going to get? I'm using the term "get." Are we really going to get what we think we're going to get? And that's why I just want to make sure we get what we think we're going to get for the 500.
Yeah, and Josh will be keeping websites updated as on a fairly regular basis on all of these. So the bike ped plan, Albemarle, although that's getting further along, and then certainly Washington Street. Our websites are going to, as with anything in planning, are really important in terms of keeping the public 24/7 notified of what's going on. So
okay, no, we're good. We're cool. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate that the commentary. I hear what you're saying, and let's make sure it's the value and that we get.
If you do projects and you do projects, you know that it is what it is, right? Great.
And thank you. Thank you for taking on the role of Councilor Grossman in her absence, Councilor Markowitz. I'm willing to take a motion at this point, unless committee members or others have more questions. I'm willing to take a motion to hold.
Motion to hold.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? I believe that's 4-0.
Oh, wait, I thought I had 6.
Now down to 4 as far as I can see.
1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, 4. You're
Five.
5.
Five.
Councilor
Okay.
Lipoff not voting.
We're barely a quorum here. All right. Great. Thank you, everyone. I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes. Bye all.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you all so much.